Sisters of Spirit, featuring Lavender Green, Raven Waters, and Samantha May.
Hi, I'm Lavender Green.
And I'm Raven Waters.
And we are Sisters of Spirit. Tonight's show, as you can see, we do not have Samantha May with us. We actually have our mascot.
Here's Spirit. And Spirit's actually dressed appropriately for our subject this evening, which is about witchcraft.
Yes, I'm a hereditary witch. I've been born and raised a witch, have been practicing all of my life.
And I myself am a natural witch, which means I have these abilities naturally, but I didn't grow up in the craft, which is a very unique experience.
Yes, being a witch means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. However, the one basic thing is it's a way of life. A lot of people confuse it for a religion. It's not. It's a way of life. It's a specific path that you follow every single day. And there's different things that different people do. But with hereditary witchcraft, we actually don't write anything down. It's passed down through mother to child to son to husband to whoever your family members are, basically.
Oh, that's so interesting. Sorry.
That's okay.
I have to say, for me, it was a completely different experience.
And what was yours?
See, I would have loved to be able to go to someone and be like, hey, Graham, could you tell me a little bit about this spell today? But I really didn't have that experience. I kind of had to discover this on my own, which was a little confusing. I was having different experiences that I didn't really understand what I was experiencing, or really what to put a name to these experiences. All I had was really the text of what I knew at that time and try to fit it in that, which sometimes it works, other times it didn't.
That's true. A lot of people are not privileged enough to have the background like I personally had of being raised as a natural hereditary witch, which my grandmother would teach me spells by teaching me to cook with certain things. A lot of people actually find that they come into it later in life and they read about it. Does that make them any less of a witch? No. That just means that that's a chosen path. My path was chosen for me, and as I grew, I learned to appreciate it. It wasn't really jammed down my throat. It was made me who I am and what I am.
That's so wonderful, and explains why your food can be so enchanting at times too. I am still working on that. That's not one of my wonderful skills, but it's one that I am learning. But
so you're not a kitchen witch?
No, I'm not a kitchen witch. And you know what? There's a lot of people who identify themselves as kitchen witch, which is a wonderful thing to bring up.
Yes.
See, each witch themselves, sometimes they'll say they're a kitchen witch, or they're a white witch, or they're a Romani witch, and it's just really to give people an idea of what they really like to focus on.
Romani witches are really an interesting set of witches. Romani witches have a very deep background in the gypsy witches, which they would travel from place to place, and gypsy witches usually go out there, and a lot of people will say gypsy witches are out there to steal from you or take things from you, but the fact is they're bartering. And that's one thing that goes back from the past, is people used to barter for things, whether it was going to the grocery store and saying, hey, I got a cow, can I have your cheese? Or can I have the eggs? They would really barter for things. So witches have a really bad rapport out there with people. People automatically assume that we are bad. I mean, I do not have 666 written on my head anywhere. But I'm sure somebody would probably out there say that I do, you know.
And it's great that you mentioned that, because when I grew up a natural witch, I really grew up in a environment that was very Roman Catholic, which can be surprising for some, that I was actually very, very spiritual in that path for a long time.
Well, Catholicism has a lot of same aspects. Like they took a lot of the different things, used them that were actually from paganism. If you've ever been to a funeral, a Catholic funeral, you've seen them walk along with the little thing.
That's the frankincense.
The frankincense,
yes.
You know. They do candles, they do incense, and that is roots that go back well before the Roman Catholic Church. So there's a lot of things that they cross-reference. Does it belong to anyone in specific? Honestly, in my beliefs, I don't think so. I think that everybody has the ability to adapt it to their own beliefs, and everybody has the ability to believe in what they want to believe in. But witchcraft is a path. It's not really a whole belief system where most people out there would say, oh, you're a witch, you were brainwashed. No, it's a way of life.
Yes, and I think that's a wonderful thing to talk about that. I think a lot of people believe that, oh, okay, you're a witch, let's say you were a teenager, some people might be like, oh, they're through this rebellious stage. This is why they chose to be a witch. But it's really not something that happens overnight. It's, for me, myself, I didn't wake up one day and said, oh, I'm a witch. It took me a very long time to really kind of discover, what I was experiencing, what I was going through. And I think with anybody, let's say you were a musician in a house that never played music, right? You find yourself drumming things and beating things and you didn't understand why until one day you surrounded yourself maybe with some people who did understand this. And that was my personal experience. I had a very long journey of just kind of having these experiences and realizing, okay, this isn't your mind playing tricks on you, and this isn't just, really good guessing that you're figuring these things out. There was something more behind it.
When I actually got married in Catholic Church.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. My mother was very much into Catholicism because she was raised in a witch's world, and I believe it scared her. So she chose to follow a different path when she got older. So when I was getting married in a Catholic church, the priest actually knew who I was and what I was, and he was very supportive of it. He actually came to me and said, I do believe in a lot of the different things that you do believe in. I do believe that there are things out there that Catholics and other people cannot explain. So being a witch was very good for me. I could walk, the church didn't burn down. I'm still here, okay? Basically is what I'm trying to say.
So you did end up getting married.
So I did end up getting married, and it was a very interesting ceremony because I personally wouldn't have chosen that, but giving that gift to my mother so that I could give her something very, very rewarding for me. And it was a good path for me, so I followed my instincts and allowed it to happen.
Oh,
basically.
wonderful. And didn't you get married on like a special kind of Catholic holiday? Like a high holiday?
I got married on October 28th.
I don't know. For some reason I thought...
I wanted to get married at Halloween because I really, really, really wanted to have a Halloween wedding. However, it didn't work out that way. But every little girl dreams of a wedding. Whether you're a witch, whether you are Roman Catholic, whether you are a Baptist, every little girl dreams of a perfect wedding. And I, myself, dreamt of a perfect wedding. But unlike a lot of kids, a lot of people pick, oh, I want to get married this time of the year. I actually chose 2 times of the year because I figured, you never know.
Give yourself options.
That's right.
Right?
So I planned a Yule wedding, which most people would have said Christmas, but, mine was Yule. And I planned a really pretty, very holiday-oriented wedding. And then my other take on that was I wanted to do something very spiritual, so I was going to have all of my people in lavenders and green after me. I thought it was very rewarding, lavender green.
Yeah, make it your day. It's all about you.
That's right, it was all about me. But with witchcraft, that's the thing, is you have to personalize it. You can be instructed throughout your years many different things, and you can be told every single day, this is the way of life, this is the way of life, but unless you live it, breathe it, eat it, it's not going to be a way of life. It's not going to sit right with you.
Yeah. And you know what, I love that you say that, because when I was on my journey of understanding how I was a witch, I grew up really around the Roman Catholic lifestyle. My first job, I actually worked for the priest. I worked in a rectory, which my big joke is I actually got fired, and I feel like...
Really? I always wanted to work in a morgue.
Yeah, I got fired. It was my first job, though. I guess I didn't clean the place quite right, or maybe I questioned a little too much.
Not enough Hail Marys.
But I was very devout. I actually thought at one point of becoming a nun, which is nothing I could actually fathom today. But it's interesting because I remember, a lot of the belief systems that I follow today, really being in tune with nature, which most witches would all agree that's something that's very important to them. I remember sitting in the church and thinking to myself, well, why aren't we in God's house? Because that was outside, clearly. Because there was a scripture I remember as a small child that talked about that Jesus, like a part of his cloth, could only come into the church, the first church that was built.
Well, in Catholicism, you're supposed to come into his home.
Yes.
But isn't his home everywhere?
Exactly. And that was something that I always questioned on a beautiful day why we weren't out in the garden sitting and praising this spirit or this energy. Well, this is a wonderful opportunity also to bring up about our first episode, which is about energy work and all about energy. If you haven't seen that yet, it's wonderful to look into, which really describes really how everything is connected. Even when we talk about, how I was brought up with Catholicism and how she was brought up as a natural witch, all that information and really that spiritual connection is connected.
Yes.
And that for me was a big reason how I could find the path that was right for me. Unlike you, you grew up in this household that, welcomed being a witch, and that was the right path for you. But for myself, I had to kind of discover that in
Well,
what
the
I knew.
strange thing is, growing up in a household that's run by a hereditary witch, it's really interesting because a lot of the times you don't realize you're being trained as a witch. My grandmother, Nana, as we called her, Nana used to go outside and she would pick plants. She would pick herbs. She would pick fruit. She would pick all kinds of things. And she'd come inside and she would make her concoctions, as I used to call them as a child. When somebody was sick, she'd go out to her garden. When somebody had a cut, a boo-boo, as we called them as children, she'd go out to her garden. And all I ever remember is my grandmother was constantly out in the garden and constantly cooking things, and everybody was taken care of. It was a free choice. It wasn't like you had to learn this and you had to learn that. And as I said, my mother really wanted to be into Catholicism. She actually, before she got married to my father, she wanted to be a nun also, which was really strange.
Yeah.
So her raising my two sisters, they went to Catholic school. I was not going to Catholic school because my grandmother had singled me out. I was the person who was going to be the family matriarch and study and learn and do it this way. But again, it wasn't jammed down my throat. Although I did go to catechism to make my first Holy Communion, I was thrown out twice. I had too many questions. Being a natural witch, I had questions. But being a natural witch meant it was a way of life. We honored the earth. We honored the animals. We honored each other. Whatever ailed you, came from the earth. It's if you were sick, something happened that, you were outside playing, you got a cut, you got sick. Okay. If there was a cure for it, it came from the earth. So it was an honoring of the earth. It was the honoring of everyday life. It was the honoring of each other, respecting each other and taking each other on a daily basis. But now, I will take this moment to say, I am not a garden witch. When I need my herbs, either somebody's going out to that garden for me or I'm going to the food store because there's no way.
That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to say too, because, you talk about honoring the earth, and really witchcraft is taking those elements and what resides best for you. Just like, you are not a natural, or I guess a green witch or like an herb type of witch, but when we do spells, at least myself, I've learned that you can be very creative.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily need to go and get like try to find a dragon's tooth to do a spell. You can do things and use things that, I think we've talked about before. It's shampoo. You can use, you have that lavender shampoo and you need some lavender, put some of that in there.
Get that lavender out of your hair. Yeah, I'm everywhere, sorry.
But I will say, and then, I like to use one of these one of these items, which is a mortal pestle. Maybe it's just I like grinding things together. But for me, it's very therapeutic. It works very well for me, and it helps me concentrate.
You know what they're really good for?
What are they really good for?
Not only grinding your herbs and for different spells.
Not just mashing things?
Not just mashing things. They're actually really good for if you have one in the kitchen. You can have several of mortars and pestles around, and it's really interesting. Have it in the kitchen. You buy your peppercorns. You don't have a pepper grinder. You grind them in there. Grinding up your herbs is really good for cooking, for spells, for anything. But they're also good for if you have to give your animals medicine.
Oh, I haven't
Also,
thought about that.
Yes, here's another one. You can also use them for makeup.
Ooh.
You have your favorite makeup, and it's just, you're putting it on, it's way too thick. So what you do is you put it in there, and you add a little baby powder, or you add a little talcum powder, or you add something else to it just to cut it, to make it a different color, and you can actually mix them. So mortars and pestles are just not used for cooking, witchcraft. They are actually helpful with every other thing.
And I think, that's a beautiful segue to really talk about some of the tools in witchcraft.
Yes.
That they don't necessarily have to be something designated for witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
You really can use anything as a tool. It's really an item that maybe helps you focus on a task or helps you complete a task. So if even with cooking, for me that's wonderful because I'm going to definitely take that home and do that a little more when I do cooking, just to put that extra intention of really trying to eat some food that's very good for my body and soul.
Yes, cooking is a really good way of doing spells. Believe it or not, in witchcraft, they always say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Okay, so if you're in the kitchen and you're cooking, or the way to a woman's heart is through her stomach. Trust me, women like to eat too.
Yeah.
It's like, hello. But you can actually do a love spell as you're cooking. You can grind up your oregano. You can grind up your parsley. You can make everything perfectly seasoned and then sprinkle it on that pasta. It's a matter of putting the love and the intent, looking for the specific herbs. And there's a lot of herb books out there, and that doesn't mean that you have to run out there and get an herb book, because there's a ton of online that you can find. But you can take a love spell, and if you really want to get a person's attention, guy, girl, whatever, you want to get their attention, and you cook them dinner, put that love into it. Grind the herbs, put it out there. Make 90% of a love spell is visual. Okay? Mm-hmm. So if you're cooking something and you put it on the plate, make it look pretty, because that's 90% of it. So cooking is a really good thing.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? That brings me to a question about that, actually. I know I've been kind of moved by some beautiful chefs that bring out some wonderful pieces that I could only inspire and hope I could get to that skill level. Does that necessarily mean that they maybe deal with the craft or may not be aware that they're
probably
casting?
are not. A lot of people aren't aware of the craft. A lot of people just have that really driven, I love food kind of thing, and I want to make it look pretty. But if you really study it and you think about it, when you go to a restaurant and they bring you out a plate of, let's say, mashed potatoes, which is the first thing that came to my mind.
It's the Irish in me. I absolutely love my mashed potatoes.
They bring you out a plate of mashed potatoes. Here's this little plate about this big, and they bring it out to you, and you're sitting there and you look at it, and it's just a clump of mashed potatoes on a nasty ass little plate. It's not going to be very appealing.
No, it's going to remind me of like some of my elementary school days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here now, another waitress comes along and she brings you out this really nice bowl with mashed potatoes, a little gravy, and a little parsley sprinkled on it.
And maybe like a little bit of cheese.
Or butter, anything.
Gosh. Sorry.
Yeah. Now that's the way to your heart. Hello.
I already feel like I'm eating that right now. I'm probably going to have to get
She loves me for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get to eat it right now without those calories, so that's wonderful.
This is true. Yes. But as you were saying, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to interrupt you, but you were saying about the different things that we utilize. The Ouija board. The Ouija board is one of the greatest tools that was ever invented. yes, I know people see this one and they think of a game because yes, you can buy it in a toy store, but Ouija boards weren't necessarily like this in the past. They were boards. They were pieces of wood. People would draw on them. This specifically is sold as a game. I wouldn't suggest people play with it as a game because there are spirits that can come through, and you really do have to know how to use it in order to use it.
Yes, it's interesting you say that about the Ouija board because, you've probably seen online at least once or maybe twice. I have. They talk about 8 years and plus, being able to summon demons, and there's a little bit of,
I'd be on the plus side.
there's a little bit of truth in that, it's not really meant and designed for children. And I know myself as a younger child that yet again was very devout in Catholicism. I never went near it. I thought this was the thing that was going to wreck my home and bring all this bad energy towards me, and that I was going to get shamed because that's a big thing in Catholicism. We have to make sure we do things the proper way, and this wasn't proper. And I, coming out of that, growing up in a different direction.
Kind of scares you, don't it?
It really does. And you know what? I know I'm not the only person that has felt ill will towards, let's be real, it's a piece of board with a paper on it.
So if you were a newbie,
yes,
and you saw this in the store and you were like, oh wow, that would be really cool to play with, what would your advice be to them on how to do it?
Well, my thing is with anything with witchcraft is understanding balance. This is really, if you look at this, it's really a piece of paper and board. You really shouldn't put that much stock in the tool, but what you can use with the tool, you should respect. So you really shouldn't be diving into, yet again, some of that energy or dealing
blinded.
with... What?
Blinded. You
Yeah,
shouldn't
absolutely.
be diving in blinded. But if you were going to use this, okay, every time I use this Ouija board, and I have used it, and it does work, okay? And you have used it with me.
I have.
We have channeled so many interesting creatures.
We've
on
had
this.
some very wonderful stories.
But the main thing I like to tell people is when you're doing it and you're not sure of what you're doing, always have salt and sage next to you. Because if you start to feel things that are coming through, and you might think it's your imagination, because you might be just playing and think it's your imagination, but if you're getting that uneasy pit in your stomach feeling, sprinkle some salt and sage on the board. It cuts the connection, and then you won't be afraid anymore. And don't ever be afraid that they're going to stay, because spirits don't stay where they don't want to be kept.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really understanding what you're doing before you do it.
Yes.
And talking to someone if it's your first time trying to go about something, really reaching out to someone or some material about doing that. But I will say for myself with yet again the Ouija board. But the one thing to really understand and know also about the Ouija board is, for myself, I'm a witch, but the Ouija board isn't a tool that comes really naturally to me. What comes naturally to me is actually a little bit more of the pendulum, or especially tarot cards. And these were tools that I tend to use, but not everybody's drawn to the same tools when they do their craft.
A lot of people are drawn to different tools. Now, as the time is moving on, I want to take just two little things before we actually close.
Alrighty.
One of the first things is, as you were saying, the pendulum. Always make sure, you can always tell when a person is playing with the pendulum just for grins and giggles. They'll sit there and go like this, And that was mentioned to me. I had several emails asking if we were doing it on purpose or if we were, actually using it. But no, in our first video, that was done on purpose. When you're using a pendulum, always stop it, okay? And always keep your hands completely still. And you'll see my pendulum's moving, and it's telling me this one is no. No, don't keep your hands still. No, it's not telling me that. But you keep your hands still, and you'll see my hands are not moving, and my pendulum is. So if you have somebody that's reading a pendulum for you,
Yeah.
They're not doing this. That was just for grins and giggles last time.
Yeah, and you know what? Pendulums don't always work the moment you want them to, too.
Exactly.
That's a really wonderful thing to understand. Sometimes you have that burning question you really want to get an answer to, and there's nothing more frustrating than to see that dead center pendulum not swinging in any direction.
Yes.
And sometimes is maybe the energy's not around, or you're really not meant to know what's going on or the answer to that question, which could yet again be frustrating, but it does happen.
So, to wrap it up tonight, I just want to say that we're really happy that everybody joined us last month, and we look forward to everybody's comments this month. And from Lavender Green
And Raven Waters.
and Samantha May, who is out there on the beach collecting seashells for our next show, which is going to be about the ocean and water energy. We are sisters of spirit. Namaste.
And blessed be.